you can't blame them for believing. Stirring up quite the frenzy, the creepypasta known as the Russian sleep experiment was believed by many to have actually happened. When our own government is accused of, and has admitted to, many morally dubious experiments done on civilians and others, it isn't hard to believe that Russia's government could be capable of the same, especially during World War II, when tests that stretched human limits were in vogue. You really can't blame them for believing that the Russian sleep experiment was a real thing. Except, maybe you can. While certainly a beloved creepypasta, perhaps being as popular as Slender Man himself at some point, the sleep experiment story has a few elements that prevent it from being macabre perfection. Let's take a look at it. It starts off with a mean hook. Quote, Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant, unquote. Not all creepypasta does this. Due to the nature of the medium, one which is inundated with amateur storytellers looking to dominate the campfire, most creepypasta has a slow start. Not so with Sleep Experiment. Immediately, we have a huge dose of context, along with a hint of the shape of the story to follow. Within the first paragraph, we learn that the prisoners are kept isolated in a chamber with microphones and narrow windows, so they can be studied while the experiment takes place. Replete with books, blankets, running water, and toilets, this chamber is definitely far from cozy, but not completely grim. The test subjects are apparently political enemies of the Russian state during World War II. For a few days, things are smooth. Sleepless, but smooth. The gas works wonders at fending off sleep, and the prisoners are in high spirits. Around the 4th day, however, their conversation takes a dark turn. Trauma from evil deeds committed and experienced intrudes on their discussions. On the 5th day, paranoia takes over. The prisoners cease speaking to each other, only madly whispering into the microphones. There is no record of what they said. Keep in mind here that these prisoners exist in a perpetual cloud of this experimental gas. The researchers are puzzled at this point in the study. Is the lack of sleep responsible for the prisoners' sudden change in demeanor, or is the gas compelling this behavior? 4 days later, the screaming starts. Up and down the chamber the man runs. So violent is his screaming that after 3 hours, he can only squeak. His vocal cords are in tatters. Soon after, another captive starts shrieking and raving. Doesn't take long for the other men to take matters into their own hands, shredding pages from their books and smearing their own feces on these pages. The other captives use them to seal the windows. And then the screaming stops forever. In fact, all sound ceases coming from the microphone. The scientists on the other side of the obscured glass check the oxygen levels to make sure the prisoners are still alive. Turns out that enough oxygen is being used to indicate all 5 men are engaged in, quote, strenuous exercise, unquote. With the windows blocked and nothing but radio silence, the scientists come up with a plan. Quote, they announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom," unquote. A single voice crackles in the microphone with a chilling response. It says, quote, "We no longer want to be freed," unquote. Let's take a short break here to go over some things. From my perspective, it's clear why the Russian sleep experiment is so popular. From the first sentence up to this point, things keep ramping up. Sentence after sentence reinforces the strangeness of these events, culminating in possibly my favorite line in the whole thing. We no longer want to be freed. If the story had ended there, for me at least, it would be a complete success. Maybe a bit of resolution would be in order, but these things don't always need a tidy ending for me to love them. Feels like something out of that book Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and I love Russian sleep experiment up to this point. As things go on, well, you'll see. Let's return to the story. On the 15th day, following almost a week of silence after last contact, with the aid of some military types, the scientists crack open the test chamber. Terror strikes them. One of the test subjects was dead, mutilated. Chunks of his flesh clog the drain in the center of the chamber, allowing several inches of blood and septic water to cover the floor. The other 4 subjects might as well have been dead. Their stomachs had all been torn open, and their abdominal organs laid out as if on display. Their fingertips were worn to the bone, literally. Not from gnawing, as the researchers first believed, but from peeling and overuse. They were digesting food, but the rations hadn't been touched for almost 2 weeks. It was their own flesh traveling down their digestive tracts. While several of the soldiers stoutly refused to enter the chamber, those that did were met with surprising resistance. The test subjects even killed one of the soldiers during the attempted removal, all the while begging for the chamber to be shut and the gas to be turned back on. Doctors got the subjects onto operating tables, but the fight was far from over. Another subject perished in the process of sedation. Even after his heart stopped, the subject screamed for 3 full minutes, raving and ranting until he fell silent for the last time. The remaining 3 men were finally taken to a separate medical facility. They relentlessly begged for the gas, pleading to stay awake. One of the subjects struggled against sedation so violently that he broke his own bones and tore his own muscles. After doctors finally got the needle into him, he passed away in a similar manner to the other subject. Tests confirmed that his blood had tripled the normal level of oxygen at time of death. Another subject, the one who'd screamed until his vocal cords were blasted beyond use, only shook his head desperately as the anesthetic gas was brought near, so the surgeon didn't use it. The subject is completely calm during the entire 6-hour procedure to sew his organs back into his body. At the end of the procedure, the subject tries to speak again, but can only wheeze. The surgeon brings a pad and a pen to the patient. A simple message is scrawled on the paper. Quote, "Keep cutting," unquote. The 3rd subject has to be paralyzed with an injection, as he won't stop cackling uncontrollably during surgery, making the procedure impossible. The moment the paralytic wears off, he begs for the experimental stimulant. When asked why the subjects mutilated themselves, they only respond with, quote, "I must remain awake," unquote. This is where the government gets involved. Seeing some horrific potential with the stimulant, an ex-KGB official demands that the subjects be placed back on the gas. So the researchers, with the help of the soldiers, strap them down with reinforced restraints and connect the subjects to an EEG machine for long-term confinement. Despite the prospect of being put back into the test chamber and getting the experimental gas like he wants, one of the 3 remaining subjects dies before he can make it in, his brainwaves oscillating between normal and flat until he flatlines totally. The only remaining subject of the 2 who could speak panics, demanding that the door to the chamber be shut. The ex-KGB commander orders the chamber sealed, along with 3 researchers. But before anyone can react, one of the researchers pulls a pistol and blows the commander away. The gun isn't even done smoking before he then turns the barrel on the mute subject, killing him. He turns the gun on the final subject. A moment of desperation seizes him, and he demands to know who the subject is, what he is. The subject responds, quote, "Have you forgotten so easily? We're you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread," unquote. The researcher squeezes the trigger one last time, killing the final subject. And this is the end of the Russian sleep experiment. So, that's it. Certainly the story does a lot right. It really nails that intense body horror and crafts a suitably disturbing tale, provides effective fodder for conspiracy theories about government experiments. It even does numbers for the psychological horror genre. But it's not perfect. Before I elucidate my opinions, let me give you some context for the Russian sleep experiment. According to Wikipedia, the author of the sleep experiment goes by the name of Orange Soda, but I'm not so sure about that. Both Wikipedia and Snopes mentions the story's origins as being creepypasta.com, and when I go to that website, a portion of the sleep experiment's page is dedicated to that topic, essentially saying all they know is that the true author is ambiguous. Some sources say the story was posted on the creepypasta website in 2010, but others claim it was originally posted on a bodybuilding website called RIP747 a year earlier in 2009. So, who knows? And that image, you know the one, here. This is famously associated with the Russian sleep experiment. When coupled with the creepypasta itself, it's not hard to see how people might take the story at face value. The picture evokes images of starved Holocaust survivors taken from the same time period of the story. However, this picture is not of any person that was once living. This is a picture of a statue made by the decorations company Morbid Enterprises back in 2005. Here's another picture of the statue. You can see the difference when the two images are side by side. While the statue is quite grotesque, the Russian sleep experiment picture is photoshopped to enhance its grim properties. Popularity in the creepypasta community generally means a story is shared more than normal, and that it might get some YouTubers to read it aloud on their channel, but not much else. Not so with the sleep experiment, spawning not only a reasonably well-reviewed book, but 2 recent short film adaptations, and likely countless YouTube tributes. The sleep experiment really has legs as a creepypasta cultural touchstone. As for my feelings, they're generally positive. The story really wriggles beneath your skin a bit, with the straightforward brutality of the experiment. The men are completely broken by the 4th and 5th days, already resorting to cannibalism despite the abundance of rations. Plus, the self-mutilation, along with the violence inflicted on the researchers and soldiers, really amps up the tension. It's written in a plain, transparent style. No hidden meanings here, and no stylistic flair. If you read this verbatim to your buddies sitting across from a campfire, they might be a bit bored. Not that the subject matter is boring, just the delivery. Let me clarify, these are all compliments. The dryness here lends it some credibility, I think, as a believable creepypasta. It almost reads like a government document discovered in a dusty file cabinet at the back of some forgotten bunker. Where I take umbrage with the story is with the little mistakes that trip things up. This isn't evident in my summary, but multiple times in the latter half of the Russian sleep experiment, the author seems to forget just how many test subjects are still alive. The author will attribute action to 4, or even all 5 of the subjects, when not just 2 sentences prior, he killed off the subjects that are supposed to be doing the action. Not only this, but several grammatical errors are present, which make reading the story a bit of a chore at times. I realize creepypasta isn't known for its elegant prose, but if I have to reread sentences just for clarity, there's a problem. Now I have to warn you, this next criticism is highly subjective, but I really dislike the test subject's monologue at the end. It smacks of something I'd write in high school, melodramatic to the point that, when I reread the story for this review, I rolled my eyes when I got to that part. Quote, "We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread," unquote. No one says this, and it sucks the atmosphere out of the story like a black hole. Luckily, it happens right at the end of the story. One final nitpick, and this truly is a nitpick, I've never been a huge fan of the humans contain this dark, unknowable evil kind of trope. Driven to madness by sleep deprivation? Sure. Supernatural forces toying with us on a whim? Great stuff. But Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde bores me, and it's really hard to get me back on board with things, even if this time around, the serum is sleep. So there you have it. Even though it fails to stick the landing, the Russian sleep experiment is a creepypasta deserving of its iconic status. It taps into valid fears of government testing, psychological breakdown, and it tosses in a healthy heap of body mutilation. I'm grading the Russian sleep experiment a B.